Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 1st of November. Welcome to November, of course, and welcome to the rest of your winter. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. 1-800-472-0391 is the Alaska Weather Information Line. Make sure you have a pencil and piece of paper to write down the numbers you use. The next time you can memorize it like my friends out on St. Lawrence Island, which the code is 123 for the St. Lawrence Island forecast, right? But hey, tell me what yours is, and I'll share that with everybody else too. Anytime you want, head to weather.gov/Alaska. If you haven't tried it yet, we talk about it a lot, but give it a shot. Mobile.weather.gov. Put that on your phone. Bring up your Safari browser, your Chrome browser, whatever you like to use on your tablet or device. It's low bandwidth. It'll load really quickly. Even if you only have 2G service, it should load pretty quickly. And then save that to your home screen, and it will act like a weather app. And that's from all of us here at the National Weather Service in Alaska, so you know you're getting your hometown forecast from the people that live and work right alongside you. Anytime you want, you have a question about that or just want to send me a picture of your village, I'd love to see it. David.Snider@NOAA.gov, and maybe we'll feature you here on the show. Here's a look at what's going on around your part of Alaska tonight. We're watching for high winds to come back up across parts of the capital city. That's not for tonight. It is for Saturday. A high wind watch likely going into effect for gusts up to about 60 miles per hour there. Kind of looks like a Taku wind event. So keep your eyes open for more information from the National Weather Service forecast team at the Juneau office. This will be primarily for the area around Juneau itself, maybe into Douglas Island. But a Taku wind could bring some gusts up to about 60 miles per hour or so, and that would be for Saturday during the day. That's not what's going on tonight, though. If you're watching the weather tonight, you're probably looking outside going, yeah, it's starting to look like snow. Maybe you're seeing a little bit of snow on the ground already there where you are. Flurries have been working their way northward all during the day, and it looks like snow could leave behind 1 to 2 inches as you head into the evening and overnight hours. So, yeah, welcome to winter. Your first significant snow there in Juneau for the season. Let's look up north. Coldfoot was indeed cold today. Temperatures struggling to get out of the single digits in many parts of the northern interior and toward Coldfoot. You can see a generally clear sky. There's some high stratus and cirrus over the region. High pressure is in charge. It certainly is starting to look like wintertime around Coldfoot. Down toward McGrath, a look out toward the north and west. You can see some low clouds there, some high cirrus, even a contrail passing through, and snow cover on the ground. And Old Glory just hanging there. Pretty steady. Not a whole lot of wind right now moving through McGrath. Temperatures only in the teens today for many in the region in the Kuskokwim. And we get down toward Old Harbor and a look down from the north. So we're looking across the island. And beautiful blue skies there. Temps there, I believe, are in the 30s, maybe some 40s in the region too. So there's some warmth still to be had out in the region. Not getting the big burst of cold just yet, but again, generally clear skies. Sunshine for you, not the case in southeast. Here's what's going on across the eastern Gulf today. You can see low pressure spinning up just west and southwest of Sitka, dragging in warmth and rainfall to southern parts of southeast and allowing that cold air to move into northern parts of southeast. As the moisture is working overhead, we're squeezing out those snowflakes, and those beautiful dendrites may add up to 1 to 2 inches of snow around Juneau later today. For many across the interior and southwest, including south central and Old Harbor, we're getting a bunch of sunshine. Boy, a lot of what you see here on the satellite picture is just some of the colder air starting to show up back on the satellite picture today, so we're not really getting a wealth of cloud cover across the interior at all. Out across the west and southwest, you can see the next wave of weather working its way northward out of the North Pacific, heading for the Aleutians. As that happens, the low pressure system is going to drop and significantly deepen. So we're probably going to get more wind and more rain across the Aleutians, and we're also going to add some more warmth to the Bristol Bay region and southern Bering Sea as we go ahead into the next couple days. A look up north shows some of the moisture working across the Chukchi coast. Continues to work in with snowfall and a little more wind. Today, a little bit of a windier day compared to what we'll see in the next few days. As this sweeps across the north and runs into high pressure, it will weaken, so conditions should begin to improve later tonight and tomorrow. Out across the Gulf, there's our next weather maker at 985 millibars. This weather front is working its way north across Juneau and Sitka and heading for Haines and Skagway. On the northern side of this is where we're likely going to see a better chance of snow. So this is developing for the rest of the evening and overnight, and then it will start to weaken here. Rainfall continues for the central and southern parts of southeast, though we understand there has been a few areas of flurries across the central part of the Panhandle tonight. Not expecting a whole lot of accumulation from that part, as we know. Out across the west and south, you see a 983 millibar low there. The trough of low pressure is creeping its way northward. This expansive area of low pressure really is controlling most of the Bering Sea at this point. We've got rain in St. Paul and St. George and some light rainfall from the Shumagat Islands westward toward just about Akutan, and then spotty areas of snow across the northern interior around McGrath, not too far off actually, and out around Hooper Bay and west. Probably looking at a few areas of flurries as some of those clouds pass and come and go. High pressure sitting up across close to Fort Yukon, around 1,027 millibars. This is really the big weather driver for most of the interior today. And as that creeps eastward a little bit, it's going to do a few things. It will start to make more room for more of these weather systems, one of them working up the southeast coast at 997 millibars. Periods of rain and snow possible, especially across the northern half of the Panhandle, but this will all fall apart fairly quickly as we get into tomorrow and Saturday. And then that makes room for the next weather system out across the Aleutians, 963 millibars there. Our friends down south said this is more of a spider weather system. I've never really heard it called that, but it does kind of creep and crawl its way across the North Pacific and into the Bristol Bay region. So as this front moves up, it's going to squeeze the wind a little bit more across the Alaska Peninsula and the southwest Capes and Bristol Bay. So watch for the wind to come up, watch for temperatures to go up a little bit more, even as clouds are moving in. And then across the northwest coast, watch for snow to continue across the Chukchi Sea region and into Kotzebue Sound. We expect fog across the Beaufort Sea and winds probably coming up a little bit more just west of the Toe Cutoff. Not quite to a weather warning level, but it will be a little blustery there along the Tanana Valley. Now, as we get into Friday, the front will linger across the Chukchi coast. Watch for snow across the coastline. The further east you go, the drier it gets out toward Prudhoe Bay and Kaktovik. Southward, clouds continue around the Brooks Range, but generally stop at the summits, and south of that, we're back into dry air, all controlled by high pressure sitting across the Yukon. That extent pushes well west of the west coast until we run into the effects of low pressure here, sitting very close to Unalaska, Dutch Harbor, Nikolsky at 962 millibars. And what's that? An area of shower and thunderstorm activity may develop as we get into late tonight and early Friday, generally west and southwest of AKwx all the way out toward the Shumagins again. An area of unsettled weather means that storms or even just showers could pop up, but watch for some convection in the region. The front extends into the central and eastern Gulf. Ahead of that, warm and wet air pouring back into southeast, but the wind should be letting up a little bit compared to what you're seeing today, and the cold air should be letting up. The moisture is also starting to wane away. And as that moves out of the way, we expect to see a brief break in the weather from what you'll see tonight and tomorrow morning into Friday afternoon, and then the next part of the system will move in. This area here is a triple point. We talk about that because that's where the occlusion runs into the warm air and the cold air. This area, the three fronts coming together, indicate a little bit more of a stronger part of the weather system, and generally we start to see low pressure developing in this area. As this moves towards southeast, it will also help to enhance the wind. So a lot of things coming together in this part of the storm that could really add a little more wind to your day in southeast, especially on Saturday. So that's why we have a high wind watch posted for the Juneau area for Saturday, with gusts again up to about 60 miles per hour. So pay attention to the weather on Saturday in Juneau. The low pressure system itself, the core of that, is still working its way from west to east and closing in on places like AKwx and Old Harbor, and as you get across the southern coastline of the Alaska Peninsula, a little bit, not too far off from Perryville, 982 millibars there. As the front's working in across Homer and into Prince William Sound, we're going to see more rainfall, and clouds will deepen a little bit more. But across most of South Central, you'll see more clouds than anything else, and a little bit of a wind coming off the mountains. That's going to keep most areas in the Cook Inlet region fairly dry, it looks like at this point. Areas of clouds across southern parts of Canada, rain-snow mix, and some of the higher terrain and just points southward because we're just not getting that tremendous amount of cold just yet. As you look out across the west, the Yukon Valley, a lot of dry air, most of the clouds across southwest, and then a break for the interior, and then back into clouds for the Brooks Range. You can see the remnants of one of those waves turning into a cold front reaching over the Beaufort Sea. This will drop toward the lower 48 in just a couple days' time. Out across the west, another cold front working through eastern Asia. Several waves south of that, each one of those kind of stirring up the clouds just enough for the bearing for rain or rain mixed with snow. And showers and drizzle continue for parts of the Aleutians in the wake of this low pressure system working into the western Gulf. So kind of an active period that we're in, and certainly one that will continue to be active as we go into the first full weekend of November. Here's a look at your temperatures. And tonight, hovering very close to that freezing point for Haines, Skagway, Juneau, points southward, considerably warmer on the other side of the front, lower to mid-40s in fact for most. Yakutat down to 21. Prince William Sound temperatures in the teens. Cook Inlet temperatures also in the teens. Homer in the 20s, and Kodiak down to 34. The southwestern towns and villages back in the mid-20s there. Bristol Bay around 26, closer to King Salmon and Dillingham. 26 for Nome as well. 22 in Barrow and Utqiagvik. 11 for Kaktovik. 10 below in Fort Yukon. Now we're talking winter temperatures, and 8 above in Fairbanks. High temperatures tomorrow in the single digits for many along the Yukon Flats and northward. Teens for Eagle and Northway. Low 20s for the middle Tanana Valley, out toward 15 in Tanana itself. 30s for many across South Central, warming up nicely for Homer and Seward, still in the mid-30s. 47 for Kodiak. 30s and 40s for many in Southeast, again, and considerably warmer the further south you go toward Ketchikan and Annette. 29 for Unalakleet, 17 in Galena, and 20 around Ambler, with temps in the Alaska Peninsula around Perryville and some of our other places like Cold Bay and False Pass, closer to 50 degrees, 44 in St. Paul. By Saturday morning, it's still going to be cold under high pressure there for the Yukon Flats and most of the eastern interior. 5 to 10 below at least. South Central 20s and 30s. Southeast 30s and 40s there. Again, these are morning temperatures. 42 in Kodiak, 30 for Macquarie and Nunivak Island, 36 around Gamble and Savunga, and about 32 around Point Hope and Point Lay, and 20s and 30s for the interior on Saturday.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to aviation weather now. Low pressure moving out of the North Pacific will bring IFR conditions to the windward side of the Alaska Peninsula there, across the Shumagon Islands and all the way down the Pacific coast, and then wrapping around to just about the Pribilofs and into the central chain around Adak and Atka, and then eastward you'll see significant areas of VFR until you get back into the next low pressure system that's still hovering across southern parts of Southeast, with IFR conditions there around Craig and Klawock and points southward toward Annette and Ketchikan, in a very slim area of IFR there right across the southern inside passages. Look for IFR in the morning across the lower Koyukuk and in the middle Yukon valleys and across the north and western parts of the Arctic coast. As we get into the afternoon, look for a better chance of MVFR in the north and across the middle Yukon Valley, even the upper valley there into the flats. IFR conditions around Kodiak Island and eastward into the Gulf of Alaska. Watch for areas of convection. There may be a shower or thunderstorm in the region in the North Pacific, south and west of AKwx, and south and east of Sand Point. And then as you get out toward the Pribilofs, IFR conditions are expected for your Friday with MVFR fairly widespread in the bearing. As low pressure moves into the Gulf on Saturday, we expect to see IFR wrapping around the north and eastern side, some of that making its way into the Dixon entrance and the Clarence Strait region of Southeast. Otherwise, MVFR fairly widespread to the north to Chilkoot and White Pass and into parts of Prince William Sound. Hit and miss across the southwest coast, but stretching into the Bering Strait over St. Lawrence Island. Some patchy areas of MVFR for the Yukon Flats, and across the north coast, look for MVFR for your Saturday morning. By the afternoon, IFR is fairly widespread across the Gulf and into the southern entrances, as well as areas along and the outer coast up towards Sitka and parts of Cross Sound. MVFR should be the rule for most of Prince William Sound down through Cook Inlet and across most of the southwestern capes, just kind of flirting with the coastline there. The Aleutians, as well as the Alaska Peninsula, will be looking at MVFR as well as the northern coastline. Let's take a look at your pass conditions for your Friday. Things look pretty good as far as visibility and ceilings go for Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass. We expect to see a slow lean over toward MVFR for Lake Clark and Merrill Pass as your Friday goes. Rainy Pass looking pretty good. Windy Pass is pretty good. Isabel Pass, we expect to see some hit and miss MVFR developing by the afternoon there. That should be centered up mainly to the eastern side of the Alaska Range. And Mentasta Pass, we also expect to see some marginal conditions in the morning and likely some improvement by the afternoon. Tanita Pass, we expect VFR. Same goes for Portage Pass, and Chilkoot and White Pass are also looking for improvement throughout your Friday. There's a little bit of a warm pocket sitting here just north and west of Denali and the Alaska Range there. Other than that, most areas of the interior are looking at temperatures that are at or below freezing in the morning. You can see conditions coming up to about 2,000 to 4,000 feet around the Pribilofs and down toward the Aleutians as we go through your Friday morning. And then our levels are at 2,000 to 4,000 feet across the central parts of southeast. Starting out your Friday there, most of south central, Kodiak Island, and again, of course, the North Slope, looking at temperatures at or below freezing to start your day. Icing potential is pretty limited there across the interior as dry air is in place around high pressure. That's keeping it so cold and clear. Out to the west, levels above 4,000, even 6,000 feet, maybe closer to 7,000 feet as you get out toward the Pribilofs and south toward Adak and Atka. Out toward Kodiak Island, again, watch for levels to come up between 6,000 and 8,000 feet and some isolated moderate hovering out over the Gulf, but right now it looks like that's missing southeast for your Friday afternoon. Looking at the upper level wind pattern that steers our weather down below, north and westerly winds coming out of eastern Asia racing across Pacific around 100 to 150 knots. That west and southwesterly flow picks up speed even more as it moves across the central Gulf at 160 knots and then slams into southern parts of southeast. As it runs into a ridge, it slows down into the west coast of the United States at around 125 knots. Several areas of disturbed weather are sitting on either side of Alaska. Wind speeds on the north side of the one across the Bering at 55 knots. Winds on the south side of the system out across western Canada running around 70 knots, and that's just a glancing blow right now over southeast. We have some stronger southwesterly winds also feeding into the Chukchi Sea at 50 knots. Down below at 9,000 feet, we have strong low pressure sitting across the eastern chain. Wind speeds on the east side racing in at 60 knots from the south and west. Southerlies into southeast. Light winds across the interior at 50 knots thanks to high pressure over Kotzebue Sound and offshore flow for Norton Sound at 20 to 30 knots. Also seen at 3,000 feet. Southwesterlies across the western Gulf coming in around 60 to 65 knots, and a healthy southerly flow across all of the Gulf continues. Anywhere from 15 to 20 knots across most of the interior should be experienced at 3,000 feet. So widespread considerable moderate for southwest, the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, all the way out through the central chain below 4,000 feet. Some hit and miss chop across the eastern Alaska Range, considerable moderate for northern parts of the Gulf and southeast, and some chop in the north.
The goat, the frog, and Mars. Welcome to Stargazers. I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida.
And I'm Dean Regas, astronomer for the Cincinnati Observatory. We're here to help you find your way around the sky. Since the beginning of time, stargazers all around the world kicked back at night and tried to make sense of the universe.
The more they watched the sky, the more they started to get to know the stars.
I know the stars may look like dots, but maybe you can see shapes and patterns in them.
Take that group of stars behind us. If you connect the dots, maybe it looks like a big goofy grin.
Or, with a lot of imagination, it could be a sea goat.
A what?
A sea goat, half fish. I know it's totally obvious, but we'll show you where to find it, along with a red planet of war and a star some people swore was a frog.
What is he talking about? Let's show you.
Okay, we have our sky set up for any night this week, facing south at 8 p.m. Oh yeah, I can definitely see it.
See what? All I see is a bunch of faint dots with two brighter stars thrown in.
Exactly. There's a sea goat, a frog, and a god of war.
You've been watching the sky too long, man.
That is true.
I mean, I can see Mars up there plain as night. It's the brightest and reddest light in the southern sky after dark, and Mars was closest to us in July, but it's still super bright and super noticeable.
And Mars will help us find the sea goat in a minute, but let's fly in for a closer look to see why Mars is the god of war. It normally takes a rocket about 6 to 7 months to travel from Earth to Mars, but we'll get you there in a few seconds.
The ancients noticed Mars looked redder than most other things in the sky, so they associated it with blood and war. As we approach the red planet, we'll first notice that it's not super red. It looks more orange, brown, pink, and rusty. And that's because there's a lot of iron in those rocks, and they've actually rusted over time.
Currently, we have 2 rovers rolling on Mars and several orbiting spacecrafts. The latest addition will be the InSight mission, which arrives at Mars in November. Back on Earth, Mars will appear near a second magnitude star named Deneb Algety.
Longtime stargazers may recognize the name Dehne since that is the name of a bright summer star in the constellation Cygnus the Swan. Dehne means tail. So, is this the tail of the sea goat? And if so, is it a fish tail or a goat tail?
Well, let's outline the stars in this constellation, and we can see all of Capricornus. Now, if you can't see a sea goat, you're not alone, but Mars can at least alert you to the presence of this star pattern. That looks like a smile or a large boomerang.
And when we throw in the ancient Greek mythological picture, we see that Capricornus has the head of a goat and the tail of a fish. This is supposed to be the god Pan, who could change into any animal.
One day, when Pan was wading in a stream, a terrifying monster named Typhon came along. In a panic, Pan changed form. The part of his body above the water turned into a goat, and the part below turned into a fish.
Talk about a dual personality. So now that we got the sea goat out of the way, Dean, tell me about the frog in the sky.
Okay, there are no official frog constellations, but the Arabic astronomers had a froggy nickname for the lone bright star in the south-southeast. There, you'll see the first magnitude and fun-to-pronounce star Fomalhaut. Officially, Fomalhaut is the brightest star in the cute constellation Piscis Australis, the southern fish.
Oh, it does look like a little goldfish.
Yes, but the Arabic nickname for the star was the first frog.
So, there's a lot in the sky to see tonight. Look for Mars near the tail of Capricornus the sea goat.
Then hop over to Fomalhaut and see if you see a frog and its greenish color. Keep looking up.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Now on for a sea ice update, and you can see across the Beaufort Sea, not a whole lot's changed since Halloween yesterday across the areas generally north of the western Arctic coast from Utqiagvik all the way out to sea. You can see the leading edge of that ice really hasn't changed much, and with a strong southwesterly flow coming up through the Bering Strait, warm as it is, we're not really expecting to see much. Sea surface temperatures are also just a little bit on the warm side right now for some parts of the Chukchi coast. So not a whole lot of changes really expected in the next couple days. We'll probably see this wobble around just a little bit as winds begin to come in a little bit more from the north in the next several days. Here's a look at southeast now. With winds setting up from the north, we've got no problem getting cold air into Juneau ahead of this weather system to create the opportunity for a little bit of light snow around the capital city, about 1 to 2 inches possible in the region. Now, offshore winds are expected to continue all the way from Yakutat down to just about Craig, where we get into more of a westerly flow coming into the Dixon entrance. North and northwesterlies coming south through Petersburg, Ketchikan, Metlakatla, 20 to 25 knots or so with 5-foot seas. The strongest winds, of course, up here around the Lynn Canal into Stevens Passage, 40 knots with a 7-foot sea tomorrow. That improves a little bit on Saturday, but something to keep in mind, a high wind watch again is posted for the Juneau area and northern Admiralty Island with gusts to 60 miles per hour on land. That'll be mainly a Taku wind event. So if that's going to affect you and what you're working on for Saturday, keep that in mind. Winds are expected to come up sharply during the day from about 7 in the morning to 7 in the evening or so. A high wind watch posted for the Juneau area. Offshore winds north of Sitka, onshore winds south of Sitka with 30 to 35 knots, about 15-foot seas expected on Saturday. For South Central and Prince William Sound, 15 knots. Northeasterlies there with an easterly flow outside of Hitchinbrook entrance. North and easterlies coming down Cook Inlet, much stronger across the Barren Islands, 40 knots with 14 to 16-foot seas on Friday afternoon. You can see that improves on Saturday. Easterlies continue with 30 knots in most areas, 13-foot seas for most of the northern Gulf waters. 3-foot seas inside of Prince William Sound, a northeasterly flow at 15 with 25 to 35-knot winds there south of Homer and outside of Resurrection Bay. You'll see considerably higher seas, 10 to 12 feet expected there on Saturday. For the Bristol Bay region, look for a strong easterly flow up to 45 knots all the way down the Bering Sea coast. Seas holding around 10 to 14 feet. A much stronger storm force southeasterly flow coming in as that low pressure system deepens as we saw on the surface charts. anywhere from 30 to 50 knots from the south and east, with 18 to 21 foot seas. Some of the highest seas actually further south from Sand Point. You can see easterlies crossing Kodiak Island 40 knots with 14 to 16 foot seas, and a much improved situation for your Saturday southeasterly flow for Port Hayden all the way out toward Chignik, AKwx, 25 knots there with a 17-foot sea. Northeasterly strong inside of Shelikof Strait to 35 knots and 25 to 30 knots coming down the Bering Sea coast. Westerlies south of Sand Point all the way back toward False Pass, 17-foot seas there on that 25-knot wind. As we look at the chain, notice temps anywhere from 25 to 30 knots or so, seas holding around 12 to 16 feet. As you look at the central and eastern parts there, the strongest winds and seas getting through the pass. Anywhere from 13 to 20 foot seas expected on the Pacific side, with the strongest winds and highest seas generally south of Unalaska and eastward toward the Alaska Peninsula, as we just saw. But again, 40-knot winds are north of Unalaska, certainly a possibility there from the north and east. As we get into Saturday, improving conditions, north and westerly winds coming in 20 to 25 for most areas, 30 to about 35 knots or so from Nikolsky to Unalaska. On the Pacific coast side, 14 to 16 foot seas should be seen there on Saturday. For the west coast, easterly or offshore winds through Norton Sound all the way down to just north of Nunivak Island, 25 to 30 knots with 5 to 8 foot seas, and a much stronger offshore flow out of the Kuskokwim Delta, 45 knots there with 15 foot seas, northeasterlies for the Pribilovs and an 18-foot sea. Improving conditions on Saturday. Still strong outside of the Kuskokwim Delta, 30 knots with an 8-foot sea coming out of the east. Offshore winds for Norton Sound, north of Nunivak Island, and then not as windy there for St. Matthew or the Pribilovs with 9-foot seas in the region. For the North Slope, look for 15 knots or so across the region and over the ice. As you get down to the Chukchi coast, 15 to 20 knots there with 4 to 5-foot seas anywhere from the north and northeast. Through the Bering Strait region, winds coming down, still blowing out of the east and off the Seward Peninsula. A stronger flow coming offshore. 25 knots with a 6 to 9-foot sea there on Saturday, and north and easterly winds through the Beaufort and over the ice. Again, continuing to stir things up there. Recapping tonight's weather, look for a chance for some light snow around Juneau in the northern part of the Panhandle, 1 to 2 inches there. Winds will be strong tonight. They'll ease up a little bit tomorrow and come back hard on Saturday around Juneau. Low pressures coming in strong for the central and eastern chain and the Alaska Peninsula tonight and tomorrow. Storm force winds there approaching the Alaska Peninsula and parts of the Kodiak Island region, generally clear elsewhere.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.